Hello guys, this is PantsMice36, and today's video is going to be a post-build review of this kit here, which is Dragon 6383, I'm pretty sure. I think so, we'll go with that, which is the Late Tiger with Zimmerit. It is actually a very nice kit. It's my first Tiger build ever, and I had no trouble really at all with it, so that goes to show you how good a kit it is. It's a Dragon kit, and I didn't have any trouble with it, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So in this video we're going to kind of look at how the kit was to build, look at any modifications I did. I kind of explain, why I did stuff, and we'll look at details and just kind of see how good a kit it is. To start, I want to point out a couple of things I've done to the kit that are not kind of in the kit. Things I've added. First of all, metal gun barrel. The kit one is it comes with a couple parts because it has different thicknesses, but it's plastic and it doesn't have a seam line down the middle because it's one tube. So there's no filling you have to do. A little bit of a kind of molding seam, but it's no big deal. I still went with with the metal one here from, I think, RB model. Pretty sure it's where I got this from. And then, like an idiot, I thought, oh, I'm building a Late Tiger, I'll get the Late Barrel. A Late Barrel comes with a Late Muzzle Brake, which is very, very late in production. So even though this is a Late Tiger, the one that I'm trying to replicate has a large muzzle brake. The other one is a smaller size. So I had to use the plastic part here because, they give you both in the kit, and I chose the wrong one when I bought the metal barrel. So unless you're doing a very, very late Tiger, you still want an early barrel. I did slice off the fender here, the whole front fender part, because my vehicle I'm replicating, it doesn't have a fender section there, so I kind of just sliced it out because it is actually molded as part of the whole front hull area. I hacked it out, actually pretty easy, considering I actually did it after I glued it in place because I didn't realize I had to cut it out. And then I kind of did a little bit of like a torch mark texture there because I'm pretty sure there should be on the side of the armor plate. And that was pretty easy. The fenders are very nice and thin, so they're easy to damage. I'll show you that later. I also added on the C-hook here because the kit only gives you 2, as every Tiger should have, but this vehicle apparently had 3. So I had added 1 here, and then the 2 that are on the back of the tank, right over here and here, are the ones that actually come in the kit. So that, along with the addition of the jerry cans and the bucket here, are modifications I did not to correct any inaccuracy, but are just things I wanted to do to replicate the vehicle that I'm making. I also have not put on any tracks yet, and that's because I'm not going to go with the kit tracks. The kit tracks are DS, which are objectively better than Dragon's Magic Tiger tracks, the individual plastic ones, because the Magic ones have solid guide horns, and the DS ones actually have hollow guide horns. Hopefully the camera will let us see that, but as you can see there, they are hollow, so they actually are more realistic, but they don't still look very good, especially when you try to make them sag kind of on the front area here on the Tiger. Over on the sprocket there, it kind of comes down. It's not going to be easy to make the DS ones look good, so I've got some metal tracks I'm going to use instead. And the reason why I also have not put on the top of the track supports on the turret for the spare tracks there is because I'm going to once again put on metal tracks there, so I haven't put on the tops yet because I'm just going to wait to locate those until I have the tracks in place, because there aren't any helpful points there to show you where to put them on. So while we're talking about the tracks, I figure I should mention a couple things. First of all, I have not glued the wheels on because the wheels are kind of the interleaved things, so this is 2 wheels and this is a wheel with a wheel behind that is kind of locked behind this one. So if you want to take the wheels off, you gotta kind of wiggle them all off one at a time, but the way I've done it, I can easily take them off. Just don't glue them on, because if you glue one on, then you're going to glue another one on top of it, and then everything is going to get kind of stuck behind itself. But the way I have it now, I can easily take off some of the wheels here if I just kind of wiggle the whole thing apart. I'll take off this guy, and I can loosen this guy and take off that one, and so on. So be aware of that. Also, I want to point out that there are a lot of options in this kit for varying builds, basically. Depending on how late a Tiger you want to do, there's different parts you want to put on. And the kit doesn't actually specify which ones you want to use. It'll show, this part or this part as an option, but it won't say which one you will want at that point, depending on, what type of Tiger you want to do. An example of those is on the wheels here. On the inside there's little tiny bolts between 2 larger bolts on the inner ring here, and they give you a set of wheels that are exactly like this, but with that tiny bolt centered between the 2 larger ones, and then there's this set here which has the tiny bolt closer to one of the 2. And like I know nothing about this, but I just asked on the Panzer Research reference page on Facebook, where lots of experts there who are kind of, and I think some of them are mentioned in this kit's instructions as technical advisors. Those guys know way too much stuff about Tigers and stuff like that, but you asked and they will help you, and they helped me with what type of wheel I needed to use here. So for example, here is the part where they show you the two options of wheels, and they just say you can use G2 and G5 or G2 and G6 depending on what type of bolts you want. And it just has the option here. It doesn't say if you're doing a vehicle produced after May 1944 you do this wheel, and before you use this wheel. But what they do show you is at the back when you're doing the actual, all the painting and marking options for the kit. Let's say you want to do this Tiger. Then they say you use parts G7, which is one of the wheels, and then you use all these other options. And basically those are things like, I guess, the size of the muzzle brake, the type of wheels, the hatch on the loader's hatch, the hinge for the round hatch on the side of the turret. You probably got the cupola type because it's got drainage slots or not, the type of roof, if it has a weld in the middle or not. And I assume that these are accurate, so if you're doing one of the marking options they give you in the kit, of which there are about 5 or 6, just follow this here and this is probably accurate. But I'm doing a vehicle that is not one of the ones here, so I had to ask people and figure out which options I need to use. Alright, now for the reason why you would buy this kit instead of any other Tiger, the Zimmerit. The Zimmerit is very good, it looks great. It's probably a little too thick. The actual texture of it and the actual how much it sticks out is quite a lot for 1/35 scale. So it's probably a little bit more thick than it should be, but it still looks good. And if I did this by hand, it would look way worse. So I can't really complain too much about it. The mid Tiger that they make has slightly more like recessed fine Zimmerit, which looks a lot better. But this is still very, very good. There are a couple points where the Zimmerit doesn't really look that great. The turret, it was all fine. But since the hull is a big box, there are corners, and at the corner between the rear plate and the side plates and the front plates, you end up with a gap in the Zimmerit pattern, and that was pretty easy solved with a little bit of putty. I'll show you in a second. You can see there that I've actually just used a little bit of putty and kind of made the Zimmerit wrap around, because of course the tank would be assembled in the factory and then they put the Zimmerit on, so there wouldn't be gaps at armor plates. And they put over top of welds and everything like that, so yeah, welds should be covered as well. So I did that here. Same thing on the other corner. On the front hull sides area, over here, note that the front plate is not 90 degrees. It's about maybe 10 degrees angled backwards. And then the Zimmerit is actually molded right here as part of the front plate. So it's actually angled slightly that way. And then the side hull Zimmerit is perfectly horizontal. So you kind of end up with a weird bend in the Zimmerit pattern there. And once again, it should be straight across because they would just put the Zimmerit on the side and continue it across. That's a very, very minor thing. If I could do Zimmerit very well, I would probably fix this by making the Zimmerit go straight across. Not that much of a problem, but just kind of things to note. On the front of the hull area here, I had to use a little bit of putty between the Zimmerit on the upper hull plate here and then the glasses plate, because there's a little bit of a gap kind of along there under the ball machine gun mount and so on. But that was just a little bit of putty I put in when I glued the thing together, so it was fine. Now on the bow plate here, the Zimmerit is molded on the front of it, but there's no Zimmerit mold on the side of it, on the edge. So you end up with an awkward spot with no Zimmerit right here. And obviously there should be Zimmerit that can use all on the glasses and wraps around the bow plate. So what Dragon gives you is a ugly piece of photo etch that you're supposed to stick on there, and it looks absolutely crap. So I'm not going to use that. I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but it looks like a piece of photo etch. It's like a big kind of mesh thing that goes on there. It's nice and flat, and it doesn't match up with the random and honestly very good looking Zimmerit that they give you on here. So what I'm probably going to do is do it by hand, a little strip there with some putty, kind of like I did on the corners in the back, and just kind of continue it across there. It's probably the only real thing about this kit that I didn't like. I saw that and I was like, really? You want me to put on that piece of photo etch? But making that Zimmerit by hand will be a little bit of work, but I don't really mind that too much. Continuing on from the lower hull area, the fenders, as you can see, I took off some of them. The fenders are very, very thin, so it's easy to slice off the sections because it comes as one kind of big long piece. I just cut it in the middle there, and then I just kind of, I did thin it a little bit at this edge because it's a little bit thick, but I just kind of sand it down, when I've cut it off to thin it down. And then they're so thin that you can easily bend them with your hands or with a little pair of pliers. As you can see, I've got like little tiny nicks, and they're not perfectly lined up. Even though they're plastic, they're perfectly straight. So a couple little like dings, like you can see right there. I made them so they don't exactly line up at the gap there. And the same kind of thing on the back here. As you can see, I bent this one slightly down. This one's up a little bit. And once again, it's because I have a photo of the back of the vehicle that I'm doing here. And you can see the angles of the fenders and all that stuff I've added on the back there. So these are all just little modifications I've done. Not sure if there should be Zimmerit along the bottom of this plate. I know that on the Dragon Stoke 3s there is not, but there should be. So there probably should be Zimmerit there. But when I put mud on this, I don't think you'll be able to tell, so I don't really care about that. The exhaust areas here, you have a nice cast texture sort of on these things that you'll never be able to see because they're covered up by the actual shields I'm going to show you in a second. I've got the nice heavy jack here, which actually has a nice clamp. I recommend that when you're actually putting on the jack, because since there's a clamp that actually holds the handle on, you put the jack on and you leave the handle off, and then you take the actual handle piece with this clamp, which just kind of comes off and goes to about there, the L-shaped guy, and then you put it on. Otherwise it's going to be difficult to get to line up nicely with the locating hole for the actual clamp there. Just a nice tip for when you're building it. Now for the actual shields that kind of go on top of those exhausts there are pin marks on the inside. You might be able to see that. Maybe there were 3. There's one here, one there, and one at the top. And they're obvious. They're very visible, especially the one at the top. So I sanded it down. The other 2 I don't think you can see because they're pressed up against the actual cast part at the bottom there, which sticks out pretty close. You can't really see them, but I mean they're kind of obvious, especially the top ones. So I made sure I sand that down. Now looking at the engine deck area, it's very nice. I guess there's not too much going on here, but you have nice PE, and they're like not just flat PE sheets. They actually have like a texture to them. They're almost like look like they're woven, because that has like a 3D bumpiness to the actual like mesh pattern of the grills here. So make sure you glue them on so that that texture is facing upwards, because the bottom end of them is perfectly flat. It doesn't look as good. Hopefully you can sort of see the kind of thing I'm talking about over there, with the actual texture. You can especially see it around the edge there. It looks very, very good. The cables here are actually, well, they give you metal ones and plastic ones, and use the plastic one, please, because it's going to be a pain in the ass to get the actual metal one wrapped in through those actual little 2 clamps there and all in the right positions. The plastic one just sits right in place, and then you have to glue the clamps on top of it, and you're done. It's already perfectly formed. It has the little, like it's actually formed so it actually wraps around this little antenna holder thing here, kind of pops up a little bit. It's perfect. Just use the plastic one as a very faint seam line, but I just got rid of it by rubbing it slightly with a little bit of extra thin cement. And then I actually had to slice off the locating pin for this thing that was sticking off the hull for the fire extinguisher, because it wouldn't line up perfectly because of the position of the tow cable here. So make sure you put on the tow cable before you put on the fire extinguisher. And over here is the whole front of this area. You've got the barrel cleaning rods in here, as well as the tow cables. They actually, I don't know if they actually said this is an option, but basically you might be able to see those little tiny wing nuts on top of that there, and over here, and same thing on the other side. Those are separate parts. They give you little tiny bumps sticking up that don't look very good. And I actually forget if they say to do this or not, but in the other Dragons kits, they often say, if you want to, you can slice that little bump off and stick on the nice little wing nut, because it looks a lot better than the little bump does. So I did that here. And then that makes the turret not be able to clear them, because the very bottom of the turret, when I actually stick it on there, will bump into that, because there's like a little bit that sticks down underneath the mantlet area. So be aware of that. So I guess I can't really turn my turret, but that's okay. I don't have any plans for it to be turned anywhere other than forwards, so I don't really care about that. But just something to be aware of. If you do glue those on, your turret cannot really turn very much. Next up, the tools on the upper front hull area, whatever you want to call it. They're very nicely molded. The kind of little clamps for them are actually pretty good, considering the most kind of details you get on a plastic clamp like this. But what I've done is the usual thing where I thin them down a little bit, because the actual little handle part, the part that you would actually grab onto with your hand, this little guy right here, that sticks off, they're very, very thick. So actually I've probably thinned them down about half as much as they were before by just taking my file and then kind of just sanding down from this way, and from this way against the actual little handle on the clamp. This here is from another Panzer III I'm working on right now, but this clamp here is how they usually come, and then this one here is what happens when I actually use my hobby knife to open up the inside a little bit because it was a little bit flashy, and then also sand down from the outsides with my file. And that looks a lot better than this blob does. It's a little bit of work, but it looks really, really good, so I recommend you try that if you can. Alright, last couple things to point out on the front of the hull. They give you this very nice metal preformed wire to go from the, I guess it's the conduit wire from the headlight to the little mount there. And it's honestly a little bit short. It barely reaches, like this little guy here actually has a little hole in it. You're supposed to kind of stick the end into. It barely reaches that. So I actually had to use a little bit of like super glue to kind of make it kind of merge into it, because it's probably like, you know, half a millimeter short. But looks really, really good. Most kits don't give you metal like this, but that's good, especially because it's preformed, so it just pops right in place. And also, this right here, these kind of like wing nut looking things. There's one here, there's also one on the rear, opposite from where the jack is I was showing you earlier on the rear plate. These are where the C-hooks would go. And remember I was talking about this earlier, those are those little things in the toe shackles. There is one here and there's one on the back because the tank usually would have two, but remember I put them on the rear of the hull, so that is why they are not in the little mounts here. But it's easy enough just to not put them in and put this in place. Alright, so with the rest of the hull out of the way, we can look at the turret now. I did not do the turret interior because it's barely a turret interior. There's like a seat for the commander, and then there's a gun breech, and there's nothing else. So I didn't bother, you know, putting any of that in. I just basically stuck the gun barrel in and did the outside of the turret, because if you can't see it, I'm not really going to work on it. I do have the hatch open because I plan to have a commander guy in there who will block the view of the non-existent interior. The actual little hatch here is still, you know, removable, even the whole cupola actually. So I can actually just, if I decide not to put them in there, I can close the hatch later on. They give you this nice machine gun mount here. I don't think they give you actual machine gun, but they give you the anti-aircraft mount there, so I put that in place. And once again, the actual position of it at the back there is just matching my photograph. There is a weird, like, if you actually look at the end of it, it just kind of ends. They have it put on this kind of piece, which is supposed to be the mount between the little arm there and the MG34. It looks absolutely terrible. It's this massive blob. So I just didn't put it on and just left that square end there, which looks a lot better, honestly. It's way out of scale, the piece that you put on there, so just don't bother. The cupola itself has no cast texture on it. But I kind of just did one with the old slather it with Tamiya extra thin cement and then kind of stipple it with a brush while it's kind of sticky. And you get a very fine cast texture. I don't want this to be a Russian cast texture, it's just a little bit of a cast texture, just a hint. That'll look pretty good. It's very easy, and it's just a great, you know, once again, a little easy detail improvement like those tool clamp sanding down things. This part here, this vent, you might be able to see it kind of looks weird because I had to cover with putty because there were actually two pin marks on the top surface kind of between two of the vents on the sides, or the little holes on the side there. They are very thin, so I just got a little bit of putty on there, just filled them up, and then I sanded it down a little bit, and it got rid of them because they were sunken down a tiny bit. So, I mean, that wasn't really any problem, but it was just kind of an inconvenience because really Dragon should be putting pin marks on the bottom of parts like this, not on the top, so whatever. I didn't use the roof. They give you a roof with a weld here, like a gap. That's a very, very late roof. They also give you different options for the actual loader's hatch here. I went with this one, once again replicating the photo of the vehicle. And for the closed defense weapon here, you have options for if you want to have it open, like I have here, or if you want to have it actually kind of like closed off the little port right there where they would fire the grenades out. So I have it open because it looks more interesting. The turret bin at the back here is very good. It's actually a one-piece thing. Like this whole thing is one piece, and then you have to put on this, or well, usually you'd put on the two, you know, hatches on top. My kit didn't have one, because when I got to this point, there was only one of these on the sprue, and I'm pretty sure what happened was it fell off on the sprue, and then it was in the bag, and then when I took the sprue out of the bag and threw it in the bag, I threw it the part. So I don't have my little hatch here. Hopefully I can get a replacement soon, otherwise I might make one, which is just a little square, or I might leave it off and make it look like it just is damaged and put some stuff inside. Not sure right now, but That's probably my fault rather than the kit's fault. The way that this is actually like molded on the sprue, the one piece turret bin, makes it so there's a little bit of damage. It's very, very minor, but the actual attachment points are kind of right up in here, and the way that it's mounted on the sprue means that it's always going to end up being bent while it's in the box, even though it's in a plastic bag. And then you end up with a little bit of like it's probably really hard to see, but it's a little bit of like a weird dent, and it's not very smooth right there. So that was a little bit of a kind of inconvenience. Same thing kind of down here. You can see a little bit of a white mark because I had to kind of work at it a little bit, because basically when this was on the sprue and it got bent, it kind of tore off a little bit and took a little section out of here, out of the actual bin part itself. So it's not the worst thing ever, but that's something I find happens with, if you have a large piece like this molded onto the rest of a sprue that has other parts on it. Turret side here looks very good. The Zimmerit is nicely, up around the actual viewport here, instead of like those weird stick-on sheets that give you weird gaps there. I actually lost one of these little guys that sticks in, so I had to scratch build one, I think, on the other side of the turret, but one of these isn't actually what it's supposed to be. It's a random piece of sprue that I made look like it. And also you have kind of holes in the Zimmerit pattern on the turret where these track mounts are supposed to go in, and they're a little bit bigger than the part is, so you have a little bit of a gap at the bottom. It's kind of not really a problem though. I just realized I've not put on the actual hinge here yet, because I'm still not sure what type of hinge I'm supposed to put on there. There's two types. But overall, the Zimmerit texture looks pretty good. It's a little bit thick, like I said earlier, but it does its job. And the actual machine gun part they give you is already kind of hollowed out a little bit, so it looks pretty good. So that's pretty much everything there is to about this kit. The overall build is very good. The instructions were clear. It's like the typical Dragon kit from, I kind of want to say before they kind of went downhill, but it has DS tracks, so I can't really say that. But like the rest of it, it looks really good. It's got the good Zimmerit. It's got the photo etch basically where you need it. It's got plenty of options if you know what you're doing. The only things I felt I needed to add were replace the tracks, because they're DS tracks, and also a metal gun barrel, but I didn't really need the gun barrel because the kit part was good enough. Only modifications I did were basically that, and also adding a cast section to the cupola, and then the rest was all just making it look like the vehicle I want to. And like I said, the instructions were, like, I've never built Tiger before, I've got no idea what I'm doing when I built this, and I had no problems at all. The only thing I needed help with was figuring out which option I needed when they said use this part or this part. So people often give Dragon a bad rep for their instructions, but honestly, they're usually pretty good. It's only on like Panzer III kits where they're on the 5th version of that Panzer III and they've forgotten what parts you're supposed to put on, that things get messed up there. But this is a very good kit, and the detail on it looks very, very good. The Zimmerit looks great, the welds look great, the tools are all really, really good. And like I said, you have the foot wedge for the grills, and that's pretty much the only place you need it. So it is a very good kit. I would recommend it. It's probably going to be expensive because it's Dragon Tiger, but whatever. It's pretty fun. Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, post them on below. I will be painting and weathering this up in a big hour-long video because everybody likes a Tiger, and I'm going to have some fun painting this guy up in a nice camouflage pattern. Thank you for watching very much. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys, and goodbye.